Everyone, I am back to cover this NFL Week 1 first look for Sunday. Super excited for football season to be back. It's not only one of my favorite sports from a DFS perspective, but for making videos on it. I absolutely love just getting you guys ready for the weeks. Also for the showdowns, I'll have videos out for that. I'll have a final look out on Friday. So looking at least 4 or 5 NFL videos for a week. Every week. Still doing NBA. And then baseball is kind of third on the list, but I'll get to it if I can, but really focusing on the other two. So let's get started. First thing first, I would appreciate the like button on the video, and subscribe if you have not already. I'll be having videos out the entire season. See if we can get 200 plus likes on this. If you want to join the team, you can visit the website. Links in description. I have a season pass on there, and I'll be putting weekly passes up later today. But let's get started without any further ado. So the first thing I like to do whenever there's a full slate for Sunday is just looking at the Vegas totals. It gives you an idea of which teams you probably should have some interest in offensively, which teams you want to target to play at maybe at defense, which games are projected to be close, so you can kind of see if there's going to be more passing or more running attempts in that game, rushing attempts. So looking at this week, some of the teams that are on the slate that jump out are the 49ers with a 27.25 total, the Ravens 28.5. The Colts could be surprising. They have a 26.25 total, facing off against the Jaguars, who a couple years ago nobody would want to stack against them, but this week, new quarterback in Phillip Rivers, we know he likes to take a lot more risks downfield, unlike Brissett, who was just going with a lot of short and intermediate routes. But Phillip Rivers will definitely chuck downfield. The Colts offense looks pretty good this year. The Raiders look good as well against the Panthers. They probably were surprising. They're 25 plus total this week. They lost Tyrell Williams to an injury, but they still have Henry Ruggs, Josh Jacobs. They have a lot of young players on offense. And the Eagles against a terrible Redskins defense and team in general, they look pretty good this week. And then to look at some defenses to target, you could look at the Patriots. The Patriots defense looks good against the Dolphins. They have the second lowest total. The Bills, the Eagles defense. So we got some options here this week. At quarterback, the number one guy, the most expensive guy is Lamar Jackson. I'm never going to fault you for paying $81 for Lamar Jackson. Most weeks it's going to work out. It's just dependent on how the rest of your lineup looks like. If you play Lamar Jackson, you're probably going to have to go a little bit cheaper at some of the other spots, which is fine just because there's a lot of value week one. So he's definitely looking great this week. He gives you the most upside of any quarterback because of his legs. Wilson is 7K. Wilson is kind of odd in that the Seahawks love to run the ball, but every week you see Wilson with high 20s fantasy points, mid 20s, even though they don't throw a lot. They throw 30 to 40 times a game, which is pennies compared to some of the other teams. The Eagles throw a lot. We know that the Phillip Rivers throws a bunch, so it's a little bit different. I think he's fine, but I think I like to go a little bit cheaper at quarterback this week. Some of the guys, it'll be interesting to see how Tom Brady looks against the Saints. They have some good cornerbacks, Lattimore, etc., but Tom Brady just has the best weapons that he's ever had this year with Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, got Gronk back. He has now Fournette in the backfield. There's a ton of mouths to feed, but Brady has all the weapons, so they're going to make it easy for him. Carson Wentz is down to 63. I like playing Wentz. He gets a really good matchup against the Redskins. They're awful defensively. They said he was dealing with a little bit of an injury, but the coaches said it's nothing major, nothing to be concerned about. Wentz looking to build off of last season where he got hurt in that early on in that playoff game, which sucked, but he has done pretty well against the Redskins always, just because they don't know how to slow him down and they can't really stop anybody from a defensive perspective. So Wentz at 63, I think that's a pretty good price point. Cam Newton first week with the new team doesn't have that many weapons. He has Edelman and then Sony Michel, but I want to see how he looks the first week before I play him. Although the matchup is really good, so could look to him for tournaments, but for cash, I think I'd go with Wentz or Phillip Rivers at just 6K. Looks pretty good. Usually I like to go a little bit cheaper at quarterback just so I can focus on my running backs and my wide receivers. But I think Wentz looks really good in that 6K range. Rivers looks good right at 6K. You have Joe Burrow in his first start. definitely don't want to play him this week just because I want to see how he looks. Definitely has the upside, and now he has AJ Green back. So, now he has AJ Green, unlike last year with Tyler Boyd was the number one receiver. So he has some weapons, but definitely want to take a wait and see approach at least the first week. Cousins just doesn't give you a ton of upside because they run the ball a lot with Dalvin Cook. And that's pretty much it. Like, I'm not going with anybody that cheap. You don't really need to. There's plenty of cheap running backs and wide receivers that look really good this week. So right now, I'd say like Wentz. I like him a ton. Favorite quarterbacks right now are Wentz in the 6K range. It's Wentz. It's Kyler Murray for tournaments, but a little bit risky for cash. And then in the above 6K, I would look at Lamar Jackson, obviously, and like Drew Brees. Moving on to running back, Christian McCaffrey. Like, if you played Christian McCaffrey every single week last season, you probably made a lot of money. Now, he was always popular every single week. This week, he has a new quarterback to work with, so we'll see how if he still gets like 10 plus targets. I would expect him to, just because he's the best player on their team by far. But it's fine. Like, 10K is a little bit expensive, obviously, but we all know McCaffrey has the ability to break the slate. Then you get a big drop-off to Dalvin Cook against Green Bay. No Stephon Diggs this year. He's now on the Bills, so there's going to be a little bit more volume for like Cook and Thielen. Some of my favorite running backs this week, like Sanders is only 6,300. I think he looks great. The Eagles' offense is pretty short-handed once again, just like last season. At the end of last season, they were very thin. And there's going to be no Alshon Jeffrey for the first like 6 or 7 weeks. There's the rookie Jalen Reagor got hurt. He's going to miss a couple weeks. So it's really Sanders and Deshaun Jackson and Ertz are going to soak up all the volume from an offensively. And you could definitely stack the Eagles if you want this week. They should be able to put up I'm expecting at least 4 touchdowns for the Eagles, and pretty good chance that it's going to be between Ertz and Jackson and Sanders, who kind of combine for them. The Bears going to be interesting. Montgomery's not expected. I think he's expected to miss. There's a shot that he can play, but we'll see. If he ends up missing the first week, then they're going to be very thin from in running the ball. You're probably going to have to turn to like Terry Cohen, although they don't like to give him a ton of rushes, but they don't have that many options. But Marlon Mack is only 5,300. That is pretty appealing to me just because he gives you a ton of upside just because he can run over 100 yards per game. It seems like this year they're going to be using him a lot more in the passing game as well, as you kind of see here in the report. He's looked pretty good in the scrimmages. He is coming off a season where he rushed for 1,000 yards, but didn't get a ton of love in the passing game. But it's also a new quarterback. They're going to be scoring a lot more points this year with Rivers instead of with Brissett. He's probably going to get like 25 touches, maybe like around 20 carries, maybe get like around 5 targets. It's just going to be a different look for him. So he's going to be probably getting most of the work. They still have some other guys that could take some work, like Himes, and they got a rookie running back. But 53 for Marlon Mack against the Jaguars, who last season were one of the worst teams against the rush. Seems pretty appealing to me. And like if I would pay up at running back, I would look at like Mixon and Eckler, who has, if you don't have a Twitter or Instagram, just look at that picture that he posted a couple weeks ago. He looks absolutely jacked. No more Melvin Gordon, which is just gonna make him the number one guy. He can catch like 9 or 10 balls. He can run for 15 plus times. He's gonna get so much workload. It's a great matchup against the Bengals. Last season were the worst team against the rush. Moving on to wide receiver, Michael Thomas is 9K, definitely expensive. He has the most upside, or one of the highest ceilings out of any receiver, but I probably won't pay all the way up to 9K for him. Like, you could see Devontae Adams outscore him, Julio Jones, and I feel like those guys will give me better bang for my buck. Thielen will not have to deal with Stephon Diggs anymore, so that's going to draw a lot more targets for him. The matchup is not the easiest one, so it's not like a lock, but I definitely like him. He's sub 7K, where he's always played very well with Kirk Cousins. Then you have like Diggs, not that interested in him. It's just like he's going from a guy that is pretty accurate with Cousins, and then he's going with Josh Allen, who is not that good at throwing the deep ball. So Diggs, and we know he loves to run the deep ball. So I think it's going to be tougher for him. I want to see how they kind of look together in the chemistry before I kind of play Diggs. Keenan Allen, I I think he's fine. It's going to be a drop off. Like him and Rivers had such a good connection. I don't really see Tyrod Taylor having that same kind of look with him. He's not the best guy at throwing deep either. One of my favorite receivers this week is going to be T.Y. Hilton. I think you can definitely pair him with Rivers if you want, but he is just so cheap at $5,800. He's going from a guy that doesn't throw the deep ball to a guy that loves to throw the deep ball. In Phillip Rivers, you should see close to a double-digit targets every single game. He's looked great with Phillip Rivers in training camp and in the scrimmages. As you can kind of read right here, they've been in sync. He dealt with a lot of injuries last season with some lower body, hamstring and ankle injuries. But he's just going to be the number one guy on this team. He's $5,800 for a wide receiver one, which is kind of rare, especially in an offense that is expected to score a lot of points this week. Give me T.Y. Hilton for sure. And then I love going with Carson Wentz, stacking him with his number one option, and that's Deshaun Jackson. Jackson only played 1.5 games last year, or not even a half. He played one game, and then he played the first quarter or first couple of series against the Bears and got hurt again. The first week against Washington, they could not stop him. He caught 2 touchdowns, 2 long touchdowns as well, 9 targets. Him and Wentz, I think they can carve up this Washington secondary once again. And then another guy that I kind of like here is going to be a little bit more risky, but that's Henry Ruggs at $5,100. And the reason I like Henry Ruggs is because he's probably going to be the number one guy on right now in terms of the receiving, in terms of being a receiver. They have lost Tyrell Williams to an injury. Maybe Darren Waller will get more targets, but they really have 2 rookies, and then Hunter Renfrow, not the baseball player, the football player, who is the second-year guy, probably going to be in the slot. Henry Ruggs will move to the outside, has just a game-breaking speed, 4.27. He's going to be able to get downfield. The Panthers, looking at Pro Football Focus secondary rankings, they are 31st, second to last. You also have the Jaguars, who I mentioned. I think the Jaguars are 20-something. They are pretty poor as well, if I can find them. And then for Deshaun Jackson against the Redskins, they have nobody to slow him down. Quinn Dunbar, who might be on him. So we'll see. But really Jaguars right here, 29. So really focusing on targeting some of these good receivers against these bad secondaries. Could see all 3 of these guys have monster games. And Ruggs, don't know if we'll get a lot of love because people might take a wait-and-see approach with him, but I definitely like him more than Renfrow. No Aguilar, going back to the Eagles days, man, he can't catch. And the Williams would have been the number one guy, but he's on the IR right now. So give me Henry Ruggs. Feel like he can catch you some passes, maybe break the slate if he catches a couple long ones. And I'll give you guys, I'll just go through tight end and I'll give you guys my flex that I have right now. But tight end, there's a couple of guys that I'm looking at. It's George Kittle at the top at 72, obviously, against the Cardinals. They are the worst team and have been the worst team at defending tight ends over the last couple years. So Kittle looks tremendous. We'll see if Deebo Samuel said he might return this week. Want to see if he's out, then that's just going to be better for Kittle. So looks like he can play. That's pretty surprising, but good for him. But Kittle still looks good at 72. Ertz, with the lack of weapons on the Eagles, he's the second guy. And then the third guy for me is Andrews. And the fourth guy I'd say is probably maybe Waller or Hunter Henry. But there's only a couple. I'm not going that cheap here. If I was taking a shot at a cheap tight end, it probably would be for TJ Hawkinson at 42 or maybe Dallas Goedert, who's going to line up and play all the snaps next to Ertz. Just with how thin the Eagles are this week at receiver. You're going to see a lot of 2 tight end sets this week. And then the flex position, usually I like to go with a wide receiver or running back. No really tight ends for me at the flex. Usually wide receivers, my first priority, and then running backs. Just because receivers give you a little bit more upside. They have a higher ceiling. And the guy that I like a lot is going to be $7,300 for, you guessed it, if I get up to him, it's Devontae Adams. I like to target a lot of these guys that just they're going to get a ton of volume. Unlike the Bucks, who have so many weapons, you could see 1 week Evans gets 10 targets, Godwin gets 5 or 6, or Gronk gets a couple. They just have too many weapons for me to just be comfortable in week 1 to decide who I want to go with. And then unlike in Green Bay, where once again they gave Aaron Rodgers no receivers, he has Adams and then nobody else, hoping that, I mean, I'm sure he was hoping to have at least like a reliable wide receiver too, but it's going to be Devontae Adams and Rodgers hooking up this week. The Vikings defense isn't super scary. Like Rhodes is just a shell of himself, and there's nobody that can stop Adams. He's going to continue to get looks. He has Lazard, who could be a little bit appealing, but it's going to be Adams getting double-digit targets. 7,300 last season against this team. He had a 27-point game and a 20-point game, so I feel really good about him. He gives you a ton of upside. So that's kind of it for the DraftKings side. I mean, I'm giving you guys some of the early looks that I like a lot this week, some of the cheap ones, and then like a couple expensive ones, well, the one expensive one in Adams. So let's go over to FanDuel and see how their pricing looks, and then I'll close this video out. Alright, for FanDuel, we have, once again, similar layout, like every team has. 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs, a flex. No kickers once again, which is nice. But let's get started at quarterback this week. On FanDuel, at the top, it's Lamar Jackson, no surprise. Like, it's similar kind of layout. Jackson looks great if you can get up to him at 94. Wentz is a little bit more expensive, up to 77 on FanDuel, but I still like him. Garoppolo looks better, but there's always some risk that they're just going to run the ball and just run, especially against the Cardinals. They can just run it down their throats. Now, Phillip Rivers, I like him at 71 this week. Not really that interested in Tyrod Taylor. I don't just think he's that good right now. I mean, in general. But I'll probably go with Carson Wentz again. Like, he gets a really safe matchup against the Redskins. Also one with a ton of upside. Now that he has Jackson back, he can throw deep. We know he does like to take some shots. He has some mobility, although he's kind of not run that much. But he can run, if he's in some trouble. So I think he looks really good. At running back, you have McCaffrey at 10K. So he looks a little bit easier to get to on FanDuel. But same price on DraftKings. Cook at 87 is fine. A little bit expensive for my liking. I love Eckler at 77. Mixon at 73 looks okay. Sanders looks great, but Marlon Mack, once again, I'm just going to ride with Marlon Mack this week. I think he's too cheap on both sides. It's a great matchup against the Jags. There's reports that he's going to get a lot more passing attempts out of the backfield with Rivers, which is going to just open up value and open up a higher ceiling for him. So I really like Marlon Mack this week. He's just too cheap, I think, on both sides. At wide receiver, we have Thomas at 88. So it's only a $600 gap, so it's a little bit easier to get to Michael Thomas than it is on DraftKings. But I still love Devontae Adams. Then we have a very, very cheap Deshaun Jackson once again on FanDuel, who is just $5,700. That's just incredibly cheap. Henry Ruggs is only 51 on FanDuel. I like him just because there's not that many weapons with Tyrell Williams out, and I definitely think it's a winnable matchup for a guy with his speed. They can't just go one-on-one with the Ruggs. They're going to have to put like 2 guys on him if they want to slow him down. And T.Y. Hilton is a little bit more expensive on FanDuel. I still think he's a fine option at 64, but I am probably going to prioritize Jackson as my number 1 guy at 57, and then Ruggs just because I think he has so much upside just with his speed. I think he's similar to Deshaun Jackson, like a young Deshaun Jackson in terms of speed and upside. So both of those guys look great. And then tight end, it's Kittle. He's my first guy. Ertz is my second guy. And then if I was paying up, it would be Andrews, my third guy. Cheaper tight ends, you have Hawkinson, who I like a bit. You have, I'm not interested in Rudolph or Jimmy Graham. Chris Herndon, maybe. But I just don't like the Jets offense that much. So I like these 4 a bunch. And then for flex, I will be probably going with or maybe even at the wide receiver position. But I like Adams this week. I think he's just safe to project in terms of targets. He's probably going to be one of the leading receivers in targets this year. Just doesn't really have anybody else to compete with, unlike some of the other guys at the top. We have Hopkins is also affordable at 78. He gets a new quarterback. It gets a little bit of a downgrade, obviously, as Murray is still kind of learning. Maybe he'll take better steps this year, but it's definitely a little bit worse going from Watson to Murray. But I like Adams, my favorite wide receiver to pay up for this week. And then from a defensive perspective, we have Like the 49ers are 5K. I usually don't go all the way up unless there's like incredible value at a week at running back or receiver. But the 49ers look decent. The Ravens look pretty good. I like the Eagles at 45. I like the Chargers just facing off against a rookie quarterback. We know they can get into some trouble with some interceptions. So definitely the Chargers look a little bit appealing at their price points. And then you could look at the Lions against Trubisky, who's just not that scary. You could look at some of the Colts, and I think the Patriots look good as well. They're a bit more expensive on FanDuel than they are on Draftkings, but I like them on both sites. So that's pretty much it. That's my first look. It's about a 20+ minute video. So hopefully you guys got some good information out of this. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Best way to let me know if you did is to leave a like, leave a comment, and see you all next time. You can follow me on Twitter as well if you want. It's at the DFS process, but see you all with probably a Thursday night video. I'll be back for NBA tomorrow, so catch you all later, and best of luck in week 1.